it forced us to have some serious discussions because basically I took the position that if, I'm not just going to be the only one signing the guarantee. If you want to be part of this, you need to sign a personal guarantee.
Welcome to Hello Grow,
the number one growth podcast of Utah.
I'm Court Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza.
And we have Joe Long on the show with us today. Joe, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So, quick introduction to Joe. We went through the list of all the companies that Joe knows or Joe owns, and it probably would have been a shorter list to say the companies that he doesn't own in Utah. He owns Gardner Village, which is familiar to everyone, especially in Salt Lake, but most people in Utah know Gardner Village. And that and additional businesses make up a construction company, home furnishing company, property management company, multiple restaurants. You are an avid skier, not as many times this year as you had hoped. You played college football. You're probably the most in shape person that I know. For those just watching, Joe's veins on his arms are bulging, and I wish I could be as jacked as Joe Long.
Thank you.
Stoked to have you, man.
Thank you.
Today in the podcast, we're going to talk about two things just as an overview of the agenda. We're going to go through your entrepreneurial journey. How did you go about acquiring all of these businesses? And now that you have this many companies, how did you build the teams that make it possible for you to run multiple successful companies? What usually happens with founders, or anyone for that instance, is when they're doing one job, they can generally do a really good job. But as they step into a second role and have a second responsibility, generally both things fall, and you've been able to elevate multiple businesses. So just starting out, when did you first get the bug of entrepreneurship?
Honestly, I grew up in it. So this business, most of these businesses that we have were started by my family, my mother originally. But I grew up in the home furnishings business as a young child. When my parents, before they got divorced, they had a string of unfinished furniture stores in the Salt Lake Valley, about 6 of them here. And then when my mother bought the mill down at Gardner Village, 3 days later, they were getting a divorce because she would just go pull the trigger on stuff, and my dad had enough of it, and so
she was the risky one.
She was the risky one, but she bought it originally, wanted to live in it as a home, just the mill and 1 acre there.
That is so cool.
And so then, as they decided they're getting a divorce, they were running the wood houses together. She thought, well, I'll just maybe open a country store in the main mill there. So she renovated the mill, bought it in 1979, so 45 years ago. Renovated it, really cosmetic renovation at the time, and then opened Country Furniture and Gifts there in May of 1980, so 44 years ago. And so really growing up, and then prior to that, my dad had a house moving business before they started the wood house.
And did they recruit you to work in these
companies? It wasn't recruiting. It was as a young child, and even at the mill when my mother bought it, it was, can you imagine, all the windows were broken out. It had been sitting there vacant for 30 years. So the condition of it was just terrible. So we had to clean it out first, and then we had to sandblast it, because it was and that was part of my job, to remove all the sand and all the pigeon poop and rat dung, and it was pretty rough shape. So we used to walk down from Midvale Junior High to go there after school and go to work. So it wasn't a by choice. It was by a necessity more than anything, because we didn't have a lot of money, essentially. And so it was rough times back then when we started that.
So all the pigeon poop, all the work, and the little amounts of money is dude, I got to do this for the rest of my life. I want to be an entrepreneur.
Well, fortunately, so my sister's my partner now. So on these businesses, I'm
older or younger
with my
sister?
sister. She's the older sister.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest of 6 kids. So I was a little bit more sheltered growing up, but and we're the only 2 that have college degrees. So we're the only 2 that, my mother was just kind of anti-college. My dad was definitely a supporter of it, and when I was growing up, we used to have horses, and I wanted to play sports. And so finally, my freshman year, I decided to kind of break away from the horses and said, I'm going to play football, and so it gave me, and then from there, and that was my ticket to college. I wanted to go play college football after high school, and so Mike Zimmer was who recruited me out of high school. It's kind of a funny story. He was recruiting myself and another guy from Hillcrest High School. And come signing day, we both thought we were getting scholarships. And he came in and says, I got good news and bad news. And we said, what's that? And he says, I got one scholarship is the good news. The bad news is I only got one. And he brought us both in the room and proceeded to give the scholarship to Brooke, my buddy, not me. And at the time I was, I was not too happy. And so I gave him a peace of mind and just said, dude, because Brooke was 6'4", 260 out of high school. I was 6'1", 180. And I just told him, I said, dude, you gave it to the wrong guy. I'm a much better football player than he is. And, football's got more to do with heart than it does the physical size. And I always kind of gave him my thoughts at the time as an 18-year-old. And a week later, he called me back and said, dude, I haven't had anybody speak to me like you did. And, if you have the attitude I think you've got, I want you to come up here and walk on. I don't have any money, but if you can walk on and make the travel squad, I will get you some money and I will get you a scholarship. Really? And so that was my journey. I ended up going to Weber State and ended up starting my freshman year and last 3 games of my freshman season, and then got a full ride scholarship after that and became a team captain my senior year and all conference up there. It was just a great experience for me, and had the opportunity. Zimmer was the defensive coordinator the whole time there and the middle linebacker coach my first year. And then each year after that, he moved to the secondary and stayed as a defensive coordinator. But then each year I had a different position coach. So I had 4 coaches in over those years, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, honestly, because of learning from each of those and the different personalities and their leadership styles, and so what a great experience. And then from there, my dad was closing some of the Woodhouse stores, and after I graduated, I went to work basically to help him because he kind of begged me, come help me, I need some help, because financially he was not doing well. When my parents split, my mother was really the marketing entrepreneur side, my dad was more the bookkeeper number side, and the thrust of that kind of went away. Plus what he had to provide her in the buyout or the marriage really put his business in jeopardy. So I helped him close the last 3 stores at the Woodhouse. We hired a liquidator and learned a ton through that. And from the liquidation standpoint, the national liquidator came in and helped us finish up our last store, and we got all of our bills paid and went from there. And then right after that, my mother was just starting the village. She'd owned the mill for 10 years, and at the end of that 10-year period, she had the mill paid off. She bought it on contract and paid the owner off. So she had the ability to go out and secure an SBA 504 loan to open Archibald's restaurant there. And the same year, we did an SBA 504 for the restaurant, and we did an SBA 7A to start the development of Gardner Village. And so she needed help, and so I started working in the restaurant, and because it was part-time, I was also doing construction out in the building, a lot of those buildings, moving them on at that time. So it was kind of by necessity more than it was by choice, but I fell in love with it, honestly. But over the years, and I think one of the things that was always challenging, because was involved in the restaurant and involved on the construction, and then got out of the restaurant and really just focused on the development side. And then we had 6 stores, opened 6 stores really quickly. And as they got settled, I find out that we have 6. CF Home had been there for a while, and it was making money. She opened the Black Goose Design in '85, and then we started development in 1990. And in 1990, she opened 4 stores really quick down at the Gardner Village, and 5 of them were losing money. 4 of the 6 were, 5 of them were, so I was doing some of the leasing after we'd finished the buildings. I was trying to lease the buildings, and then I was going, why are we running these stores if we can't make any money in them? So I closed a couple of them and then started working on improving the others. And my mother had muscular dystrophy, and so at a young age, and her new husband started having grandma brain seizures.
I have a question on this. Is there? You're working for your dad, helping him rescue his stores, helping him shut down his stores. You're working for your mom, helping her get her stores up and going. Yeah. Is there hey, stop helping dad, we're not a couple, and she's getting remarried. Is there anything being said of dude, you shouldn't be helping that person, Joe?
No, so it wasn't simultaneous. So I kind of jumped through that, but after I graduated from college, I helped my dad close his last 3 stores.
Got it.
And so we finished the last one. Once I finished the last one, that's when I made the conversion over to the mill.
Got
and
it.
that's what was happening is she was just starting.
So
those
how
other
did you
entities.
figure out, were you part of helping her flip those 4 non-profitable stores around to make them profitable?
Yeah, I was. So,
What was that process? What role did you play?
Well, actually, so in '94 is when that kind of took place, and we had these, 6 stores. We had 6 stores, CF Home, Black Goose, and then 4 small stores in the village. And I kind of, what I was leading into is that was when my mother, she got remarried, and Chris was the one that was really instrumental in starting the restaurant. So as Chris did the 504 and did the restaurant, my mother did the 7A and was doing the development for the village and opening those stores because of the retail.
Got it.
And so that's how it worked. So Chris was actively involved in the restaurant and running that. And he started having grand mal brain seizures, and my mother had muscular dystrophies. And so they decided really early that, hey, we need to create a succession plan in case something happens to us. Plus, we had a state tax problem. So we started creating an estate plan, and she's like, who's going to lead the charge? And I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and 4 of the 6 are working in the business, and I'm the last one in the door. And all of a sudden, she dubs me the president because,
Of the company?
of the company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh
so
my
after
gosh.
I'd been involved
Okay, so what's
for about 4 years. This is 4 years in. 4 years into this process of it. I'm 25 years old.
And you're the president
25
of Gardner
years old.
Village at 24, 25 years
Correct.
old, and you have 4 other siblings
Working in the business.
Working
and a
in the-
brother-in-law.
working in the business and a brother-in-law that have all been there more years than you.
Yep.
How did they take that?
Not good. It was not easy. And one sister left immediately, 3 months after into the whole process, which was running one of our stores that wasn't making money. So as I started digging in, we had a big clash because that didn't go well. And then my brother-in-law was doing the accounting at the time, and then I had a sister that was running another store, and another sister that was doing another store. So my partner now, as we kind of move forward with that whole process of it all, there was a lot of tension with that because I was obviously the last one in the door. But one of the things that started taking place is my mother is very intense. So she's director driver all the way, very intense. And as we started having meetings, I was a little more diplomatic. And one of the things that came out of that was, Kyle, you have a meeting and people are laughing and having fun. And
Did she say that?
when I have a meeting, people walk out crying. That was the culture that we had. Honestly, it was. And so, and my leadership, what I learned at Weber State, because I was team captain for 2 years and had to run all the meetings and run winter conditioning and some of that stuff, it was learned some diplomacy through that whole process of it all. And so I think that's what saved me, honestly, through that process because it was tough, especially having a sister that worked there and her husband that was essentially the controller and accountant. And knew everything, but didn't write anything down. So I was, first thing I tried to do. So as I came in and became the president, we had 3 companies, the property management, the food service, and the retail. And we had 3 sets of accountants. So the first thing that I did financially to help us try and get profitable was consolidate the accounting, 1 department, not 3 separate accountants. And so
Did that leave your brother-in-law without a job? Or was he the head of
eventually,
that?
yeah, he did because I hired a gal to come in and she had a degree in accounting and a master's in tax, and she brought the accounting level to a point where he didn't really fully understand it anymore, and so we kind of tried to shift him into a new role of operations versus accounting, and then eventually we ended up, buying him out.
And you're making these decisions
And there you
as
go.
a mid-20s kid
Yeah.
out of college.
My
With all
mother
your
was pretty
oldest-
instrumental in that one. In reality,
older
she
siblings.
it was kind of a little bit of a force out, honestly, but with him. But we gave him a severance package, and he's actually gone out and done incredible on his. He went to work with his brother, and they started FJP Supply. He owns that now, and he's done extremely well, and has had huge financial success, and done even better on his own. So I think it was a good move for both of us.
So you're a 25-year-old kid making this happen. Your mom's very instrumental in making this whole process go. What are you at? what are the emotions that are going through your head? How do you prioritize the success of the business versus over your relationships? Maybe that's the question.
So
How did
honestly,
you
that was
figure that
tough. That
out?
was really hard times. So 94, when I was dubbed the president, essentially how I felt at that point was I had all the responsibility with no authority, because my mom was still actively there, and Chris was involved in the restaurant. And so they're both there on a daily basis. And so I'm supposed to be running the show, but yet couldn't, I had to get permission for everything essentially. So 94 to 96 was couple of rough years, and especially with the family dynamics and that. And so 96, I finally was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. And I said, either we start an outside board of directors and we bring in some outside board members, or I don't want to do it anymore. And so we did. We actually, and the best thing we ever did. So we brought in Rich Robbins, who was had been tons of commercial real estate leasing agent in Trolley Square for years, still in the commercial real estate space right now. Kerry Judd, who was a CFO for Mrs. Fields Cookies from 0 to about 400 stores, and then so we had the food service background
From Park City?
Mm-hmm. And then Wayne Palmer, who owned a company called National Note, and who helped us get a lot of the funding for our loans, that original 7A and 504. He was a finance guru, and then Jeff Jensen was was our CPA at the time, and Jeff Jensen in Kennington was doing all the Larry Miller dealerships at the time for years, and so because he was our CPA, he was an advisor to the board. He wasn't a voting member, but brought in 4 outside board members, and then Chris and Nancy had a vote, and myself and Angie, my current partner, were the other 2 votes. So we had Jeff Jensen as, if he needed to do a stalemate vote break, we actually did that at one point on one subject. Because there was controversy between my mother and Chris and Angie and I, the next generation, so to speak, all the family left the room and we said, you guys make the decision and we'll be back in when you're done voting.
Wow.
And so that was over the Scarecrow Festival years ago.
Would you recommend that approach to family-owned businesses, bringing in an outside board?
Well, I know it was helpful for us. So, I mean, because, my mother at the time, especially, she wasn't ready to step down, but because of the estate planning and the succession, because with her health, that's what drove it so early, and I wasn't prepared in either. So what it really forced me to do is really dot all my I's and cross all my T's. I had to come up with a plan. I couldn't just come in and, I want to do this. I had to document everything. And so I had to have, everything, financial plans, any hires I wanted to make, I had to make them pencil. I had to do everything from that side of things, and it forced me to grow up a lot, honestly. And then it gave them peace of mind that, hey, So at first, man, they scrutinized everything, and it was this was from '96 to 2002. Over that period was when we had that board of directors, and then in 2002, my sister and I bought my mother and
walk us through
siblings out.
Walk us through that
point.
Buyout process.
So,
How can you talk about the type of risk that you took on, the change in you now probably have accountability in addition to responsibility?
No, it was major. In talking about partners and family members, I think at the time I took on a $4.2 million loan, and then also had $1 million carryback, so it was $5.2 million.
Had you ever had a loan that big before?
Never.
You're in your 30s at this point.
Yeah. So,
and
it was huge. And so one thing that happened was when I went to the bank, basically they because my mother had gifted, small percentages, a lot of on the real estate side, which is where the loan was, everybody received 6% of the company. So I had 6 siblings with 6% each. And the bank basically came in and said, anybody with 20% or more has to sign personally on the guarantees. Well, I was the only one over 20% at the point. So I was the only one staring at and signing this personal guarantee on this note, and none of the other ones were. So it forced me to sit around the table and say, number one, do I want them as a partner? And then number 2, do I want them as an employee? And frankly, there was, as I went around the room, my partner now is the one that I said, absolutely, I want her as a partner. And I want her as a partner, and as I want her as an employee. And my brother was like, I don't even want him as an employee, let alone as a partner, honestly, because he just wasn't, he wasn't contributing, he wasn't, carrying his weight, and yet he'd been there in the business the longest, was the sad part. So,
And he's going to be a 6% owner of the company.
So it forced us to have some serious discussions, because basically I took the position that if, I'm not just going to be the only one signing the guarantee. If you want to be part of this, you need to sign a personal guarantee. My sister Teresa, who who was in the business and we wanted involved, basically said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take on that risk. And in fact, if anything, if you could buy me out, I'd like to leave. And my brother, he was like, yeah, I want in, but we had to say, we don't want you in. And so we want to buy you out. So we had to have some really heart discussions.
Did you save that relationship?
With my brother, no. With my sister, yeah. So my sister's, we have a relationship there. And that was the one that her husband worked there for a while, or for years. And then he's the one that left and started his own company. And they've done well since the buyout. But
I think that's one of the difficulties, that people get into business with people that they love, and that's family.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that people don't realize is that there may come a time where you have to choose whether you're going to allow the relationship to survive or the business to survive. But it might not be possible to have both of them to survive.
Yeah.
And so going in with eyes wide open of, am I doing this because I want the relationship and this is going to be a fun adventure that I'm going to do with this person? Or am I doing this business because of the difference it's going to make in the world, or whatever it is, this mission that I'm trying to fulfill? And how important is that relationship compared to this mission that I'm trying to drive? Because I might have to choose one or the other.
Well, to follow up with that, when we started this process of the estate planning, we hired a group called the Cohen Financial Group out of Phoenix, Arizona. And a gal named Jane Sassano came up and actually, basically held a family meeting and had a discussion about it. And one of the things that she brought to us was, the first question she posed to us is, are you a business first family? Or are you a family first business? Is what she posed to us.
Did everyone give the same answer?
No, they didn't. No, we didn't. But we ultimately made a decision on what we were going to be. And I think that's what has helped us, and helped me enforce what that is. And we basically decided at that point that we were going to be a business first family, that we were going to put the business first, because the business is what's going to take care of not only our families, but all the employees that relied on it to be successful. So we, it wasn't going to be. And at the time, I had a sister that was working there that, wanted to put her car in the business and write it off, and just make decisions that, it's like, we can't afford that. We can't afford to make your car payment for you, and we're not going to buy that car. So she was putting her interests, her family, over the business. And so that was really a defining piece for us, and we've held to that ground ever since, And so, not only in 2002 when my sister Angie and I acquired majority interest in the business, we acquired majority interest in two: the food service and the retail. But we still had minority shareholders and siblings in the property management company. That they each had 6%. And then as we started growing and expanding from there, first thing that happens when the company didn't have the capital, so we needed influx capital into the company, and nobody wanted to put their share up. So we did a capital call.
That's a good way to get people to ante up pretty quick.
So, or dilute them, essentially. And I had, when on the first round that we did, it sparked two of them that said, not only do I not want to put in, can you buy me out? And so we did. We bought, two of them out at that time. And then we diluted the other two because they wouldn't put their capital up. Well, 2 years later, we went to acquire some additional ground, and the one basically said, I didn't agree to the first dilution, and I want my interest back and some of that other stuff. And it sparked a kind of controversy, essentially, and went 3 years in a kind of a legal process, and actually ended up finally buying her out 3 years later after that. But and the relationship's not good today, essentially. So, this family business has created a lot of challenges for sure, and heartache.
I'm very interested because something that we often laugh here at the podcast, that we're trying to summarize 20, 30, 40 years of business into 1 hour. It's impossible, right? And I don't think we do justice to your story. But That must be extremely difficult to just kind of navigate life knowing that those things have happened, right? What is a piece of advice you'd give to someone who's had relationships damaged because of business? How do you go about life, and what's a piece of advice you'd give to these people?
I think the interesting thing for me is just realizing that, as I grew up, I always thought that we're a family, so we kind of think alike. And I think that realization through those processes is what made me realize you don't think alike. Even though we grew up in the same house, we had a lot of the same experiences. Man, we have different philosophies and different approaches to things. I think my brother, for an example, his philosophy was we should all be paid the same. No matter what role we're in or whatever, what we contribute, we should just all be paid the same. And it's just like, that's never been my philosophy. Entrepreneurship's about contribution, and whoever contributes the most gets the most is my attitude. And so I think, it's just, but it obviously creates a lot of hardships, so I think the experience share would be what I learned through that is documentation. Document it all, document everything, and be forthright, be upfront, as best you can, and you over communicate, if anything, I think is probably what I've learned through that process.
I love that, because I like what you said, and that question that that person asked: are you a family first business or a business first family? Right? Because even when you are upfront and you establish expectations, there's still a risk of things being damaged. Imagine not having those conversations. Right? Yeah. It's much worse. I want to go back a little bit to when you decide to put that board together. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a few entrepreneurs listening to the podcast, and what are some early signs or some signs that an entrepreneur should listen to or should look at that they need to put a board together? And then follow-up question is how to put a board together.
I think when there's dissension among the ranks, I think with us, even though I was dubbed the president, I had the title, but really didn't have the role because of lack of experience and others in the business that didn't really have a title, but really had the role. In reality, with my mother, she built the business. So who's going to come in and if she says something, they're going to run with her, not with me. I think in most cases. So I think to help define that, not just even in family business, but I think that happens in tons of businesses where there's power struggles and those types of things. So I think it clearly helped us define those roles a lot better, for sure.
And how do you go about selecting the right people to be on that board?
For us, because we didn't really have shareholders, I think most boards are formed because somebody has equity and they put some dollars in and things like that. I think what we were looking for more specifically was experience in the industries that we were in that could help add value to us through, providing us data in regards to KPIs that we were looking for and numbers that we didn't really, have access to and things like that. So that's why I think, because we're in the leasing business and commercial real estate, that's why we went to find Rich Robbins, and then the food service side with Kerry Judd and his expertise and networking that he was in, because he was in the food industry for many, many years. And then Wayne Palmer on the financial side for us to be able to finance the business and things like that. And then Jeff Jensen, because he saw a myriad of businesses and had a lot of retail clients as well as, car dealerships and things like that, because they're dealing with a lot of the same focuses that we are and driving sales and something like that. So that's really more what we were specifically looking for on our end of it.
So you identify the weaknesses, the strengths, the opportunities of your business, and then, okay, we need this profile, that profile. And do you reach out to people in your network, or these people that you're working with, that you're doing business with, or these friends, family, for someone that's trying to put a board together? How do they even,
all of them were really people we'd known, because my mother actually, with Rich Robbins, we had a store at Trolley Square. He was the leasing agent at the time. My mother, he created our lease that we signed essentially on that end of things, and just had a lot of respect for the guy. I think was through that negotiation, he was pleasant. That's what we want. I think from a cultural side of things and that. And same thing with Kerry Judd. We'd known him and came as a referral from Jeff Jensen. We'd worked with Jeff Jensen for 20 plus years. Essentially he's our CPA for over 20 years. So a lot of it is just experiences and people we knew and that we could call on for sure.
Joe, I've loved this, man. Tell us now how you've managed to make it so successful after 20 years of having multiple companies, leasing, retail, warehouse, construction, 24 different shops or businesses, pieces of real estate, leasing from you guys, some of which you guys own. What is your structure? How many teams do you have, and how do you manage? Let's start with one question first.
Okay.
What structure do you have?
Structure. So we have 4 companies, 4 separate corporations with 8 profit centers and 11 departments, essentially. So the retail, we have 4 home furnishing stores underneath the retail division, and then we have a warehouse that supports those over in Midvale. And then the food service, we have Archibald's Restaurant and the Gathering Place, the banquet facility, and then the property management company, and then we have the construction company. Essentially, this is how we're formed. But going back to your question, I mean, honestly, I think when we really started gaining some traction was after the buyout in 2002, when Angie and I bought the business, and I was reading a book, The Servant, and I remember I was at Raging Waters of all places with my kids, and I was they were out playing in the water, and I was reading a book, and it was The Servant was the name of it, and I read this portion that just literally made me break down into tears, and it was because it was right after my brother had left the business, and the servant mentality is you manage the business with the CEOs in mind. The customers, CEOs, if you do that, C, employees, O is the owners, and S is your suppliers, is kind of what that book was all about. So the CEOs in mind, and I was the CEO of the company essentially at the time. And I remember reading this, and obviously the first focus is on our customers. Second has to be on our employees, because if we don't take care of our employees, the employees aren't going to take care of our customers, essentially. And then O is owners. Owners, you can't be afraid to say we're here to make a profit, because we won't be in business if we don't make a profit, right? You got to close the doors. And then S stands for your suppliers, and how we treat our suppliers. And if it's a janitor, if it's you treat them with respect, you know what I mean? And I remember reading this passage and we didn't have a very, very good culture, and it was a major change of the culture because my mother had just got bought out and left, and my brother, and I remember sitting there thinking that we can run this company with dignity and respect. We can treat people with respect, but because my brother, I mean, he literally sometimes he was a warehouse manager, and he'd pick up the phone, "What the fuck do you want?" Literally to our salespeople, if he was having a bad day. And I allowed it. I was allowing that shit, honestly. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? Because I couldn't hold him accountable as a family member, I wasn't holding anybody accountable, is what I remember. That's what I learned from that book, and just was like, holy cow. And I brought that book to my sister, my partner, and just gave it to her, and it's been a part of our culture ever since. We started, and the turnover that we had prior to that was just amazing. We had 26 people work in our warehouse in 1 year. The turnover was that high, of a crew of about 15. We had 26 that came and left, and so we started really focusing on our culture and what that meant to us and what that stood for, and that really changed where we were going and how we retained people, and started putting a focus on how do we retain. Started a 401k program and looked at our benefits plans, and it was just a trickle down really piece from there. Started listing our core values and putting them out for people to challenge was really the focus of that. Because you say you see things hanging on the wall and you say, here's our core values, and what do they mean? Do people talk about them, or are they just a nice sign on the wall? And our whole focus was, we want if you see us make a decision that doesn't fit these things, we want you to talk to us about it, so we can have a conversation around it and have that clarity. So I think that was a huge changing point for us, I think, for sure.
What's the structure around retail, restaurants, warehouse, and construction specifically, do they have, each one has their own general manager? Do you consolidate financials within all of them into one financial entity, or do they each have their own controller, they're each CFO? Walk us through that.
Another major piece for that is our financials. So I think that was a major revamp that we created. And when you talk about our employees, I think that, so the structure on the retail side, my sister is the president of the retail, and she oversees all the retail stores. And then from there, we have a general manager and assistant manager in every store in the 4 locations. And then we have a general manager and assistant manager in our warehouse. So there's those 5 different departments there.
The GMs all report up to your sister.
Just to my sister.
Got it.
And then I oversee the food service operations, but I have a general manager in the restaurant. I have a general manager in the gathering place, in the banquet facility. And then we have assistant managers and hierarchy that follows from there, and they report to me. And then I have a property manager that oversees the property management, reports to me. And we have in the construction side, my property manager and construction manager is the same guy, oversees both. And then from there, we have in departments, we have a marketing department, which
Each one has its own individual marketing department?
no, we have one overall marketing department that
That's
markets the village and each of our retail and food service operations. So we have one
Got it.
marketing department, and we have one accounting department, and then we have maintenance department, essentially, that falls in there. So
Most entrepreneurs struggle to find one GM
yeah.
to manage their team.
Yeah.
And between you and your sister, it looks like you have almost a dozen, half a dozen at least, that are running your different entities. What's the archetype of those people? Did you go through traditional recruiting? Were they friends of yours? Were they internal hires that you promoted? Walk us through that.
No, over the years, because, it's been a challenge for sure. It's been, people is, your blessing and your curse. You find the wrong one, it's a curse, and you find the right one, it's a blessing. And so I think, we as I mentioned, we had a ton of turnover, and our focus to change that was first by getting them ownership. You know what I mean? Not actual stock or bond or anything like that, but as far as understanding the business and understanding the numbers is what people thrive on. I think to go somewhere and you don't have a purpose, it sucks, I think. So, I think one thing that we did was I reformatted all of our financial statements so that we basically, everything flows. Because the foods industry is different than the retail, and the property management's different, and that they were all over the board. Well, what I did is I created every category that was similar. And so when we have labor costs, we used to have 15 different labor categories because of you have servers in the restaurant and you don't have servers in the retail. But now we started combining some of those. So we on our financial, how it actually reads is sales/servers. And then if we have 3 categories because we have something in the property management side, then we have 3, another slash. And so we consolidated 15 down to 7. And then operationally we did the same. And so now how our financial reads is every manager has their own financial. So we have a financial statement for each profit center, essentially, and then how they get bonused. And so every manager has a bonus program. So because I didn't want to disclose, what we do is we tie it to what we call operational expenses or controllables, what they can control. But they can't control the marketing department spend. They can't control my salary. They can't control what the occupancy costs are of the space. And accounting salaries and things like that. I make those decisions on who we hire in those positions and such. And so we take everything that they can control and we break it down into the top line in revenue, cost of goods, and then controllable expenses. And then we have what we call an operational income line. And then below the operational income line, I break down corporate overhead expenses. And then we have a net profit at the bottom. So when I originally took over, my mom was like, and I'm saying, we got to give these people the numbers because they can't control shit if they don't know what they're doing and they don't have the numbers. And the data, you can't give them that. You can't give them the numbers. And I'm like, we have to give them the numbers. So that was one of the first things I did is create this format. And then start creating bonus plans so that they're incentivized on what they can do and how they can perform. And then from there is we sought out what we call entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs inside of our business, people that think like us, think that want to own their department and have their say, essentially. So it's like, if that's a controllable expense on your line, you don't have to come ask my permission for that. You can do it if you have it in your budget, essentially, was kind of the philosophy. So as we started getting that system and structure put in place, it really became a lot easier to find the people and the candidates that thrived on that, essentially, because that's what we, all the discussions were all about, when we bring them in. And then, looking for people that had those types of experiences, essentially, was our number one focus.
So these are all internal promotions to your GM spots?
Not internal, no. I mean, but as we're interviewing people, I think especially in the food service side, there's so many general managers that are working for a franchise that they don't give them shit. They don't know. All they know is they turn in their labor costs at night and goes to corporate, and they don't know what food costs are. They don't know what labor costs are. They don't know what their linen costs are. They don't know anything, is what I found, because you interview these people that, wow, they have a great resume. It looks like they work for these big corporations. We don't like people coming from big corporations, frankly. We like people that work for mom and pops that they gave them the numbers and they knew that, hey, we can't afford to spend that, you know what I mean? So that's what we're looking for, more than that, My general manager at Archibald's restaurant right now worked for Porcupine for 17 years.
Porcupine Grill.
Mm-hmm. Now, but started with them when they had just one, and then they branched out, but she knows her shit.
Do you guys follow a hiring methodology? Are there specific? How do you identify that trait in people when you're hiring them?
That's hard, but it's asking a lot of questions, and really grilling them on percentages. It's a game of business is a game of numbers. That's what I've always said. And you've got to have your numbers in line. You know what I mean? Essentially, and so it's like, when you start grilling them and asking questions about, hey, what kind of food costs did you run? I don't know. We ran, and how do you lower it? What kind of labor costs do you run? What is your linen cost? When you start asking questions like that, whether they are seeing financials or if they're just a spoke in the will, essentially.
So not so much of a methodology, but you go in and you just keep digging until you feel satisfied.
And culture too. I think culture's, probably one of the bigger pieces, essentially. We have a grading system. We talk about high performers, scale of 1 to 10. And then high culture fit, scale of 1 to 10 on the graph this way, and then you put a line and grade it. So you got 4 boxes essentially up there. So we're looking for high culture fits and high performers, essentially, what we really want to find. When you find a high culture fit but a low performer, those are kind of your imposters, because they're nice people. There's don't give you a reason to fire them, but they just don't produce a lot. And then you got your high performers but low culture fits. You know what I mean? And they're easy to spot because they're performing, but they're running over everybody in the process. Nobody likes them. Some of those things, So it's like that's some of the quadrants that we really look at, and then we go through what we call with our culture. We created what we call a wheel of excellence, and kind of fitting for us because we have a water wheel on the side of our mill, and so that's what it is. Is we have it's an emulation of a water wheel, and then we have buckets in there. On the bottom of it's our core values: integrity, excellence, caring, creativity, and passion. Our 5 core values, essentially. And then the top are sales growth, driving sales growth, ratings, fan service, exceptional products, and make a little profit. We put it right out there. We got to make money, or we won't stay in business. Operational excellence, another one. So those are our 5 operational values. So then that's what we really, when we sit down and say, how are they operate, from a core value standpoint, we look at each of one of those pieces and say, where do you fit on that? Where do you fit on this? And a lot of times we'll push one over to somebody, because, in the process, and say, you put down where you're at, and I'll put down where I think you're at, and we'll compare notes, essentially, so that I'm not just grading it. And then we say, where's our gaps? Let's talk about those gaps. I think it's our best thing to do.
I love that, and I feel like for entrepreneurs, leaders listening to the podcast, hiring is one of the most important activities in the business, and there's a lot of oversight there. Yeah. People are on a hurry to make a hire, and they feel like in 30 minutes they can make a decision. We've had multiple people on the podcast that we've asked them, what is the biggest setback that you've had on your business, or the biggest loss, financial loss? and it is always people. And we still have entrepreneurs that don't spend the right time during the interview. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I did hiring for for Aspen for a little bit, and there's so many hiring managers today that they feel like, oh, we don't need more than 1 hour interview. It's boring. We're boring the candidate. It's not a good impression. But I actually learned to love digging because people cannot put a face or put on an act for more than like an hour. They're interview lions. They come prepared. They have the right answers, but they can't hold that for too long. And if you dig, you actually get to know the real person. So I just wanted to say that I love that you said that, because we can't talk enough about putting the right energy, the right amount of energy and effort on hiring for the listeners.
Oh, we're really blessed because we have a gal in VP of Operations that has been with us for 30 years. So Marcy Balfe is her name, and she does all of our screening. So she basically we do a phone interview first, and then if she feels they're qualified, then she'll bring them in for an interview with the store manager, and then we'll bring them back for a third interview from there. So it's typically our process. So we typically always do 3 interviews in the process of it all, especially for a management position. But she's amazing because she gets them to talk. I mean, she can talk toothpaste back into a tube, I swear. I mean, she does. She just gets people to open up because she's just so likable. And they'll just start spilling their guts to her, and just like, sometimes she's just like, ooh. Should have told me that. But she's amazing that way. And so I think we've put a lot of time and focus on that for sure as a company.
Can I ask you, Carlos mentioned we'd like to dig in those interviews. Can I ask you a question that's kind of a digging in?
Sure.
You said one of the things is make a little profit.
Yeah.
Why not make grundles of money?
I mean, we're all about that for sure. I mean, obviously, but I think our focus with that and why we don't put it out that way is because I think we're a profit sharing company too. So as part of our benefit package, because we do, we have a 401k, we do health benefits, and so I think we're always focused on how do we continue to put more money into those areas, and that's obviously the more money we make, the more we can put into that, as you know. But at the end of the year, we do share profits, and we do an added match into our 401k. We do a fixed match of 30 cents on every dollar, and then at the end of the year, if we depend on the profitability, we'll do an added match into that side of things as well. Another really cool thing that actually came from an employee is, you see, I'm sure you've been in businesses where somebody has a hardship, somebody has a death in their family or a major car accident or something, and so people start passing the hat around, and to help them with financially. And we had an employee say, what if we did kind of like an employee relief fund? So when we had this happen, we don't have to do begging for money. We could just have some funds there that we could give them. And we were like, I think it's a great idea. So when we originally kicked it off, the company matched. So we basically said to our employees, look, if you want to contribute to an employee relief fund, and we have that as part of our sign up, we bring on a new employee, part of their W-2 paperwork and all that, they do the employee manual that they sign off on. We actually present the employee relief fund and said, would you like to contribute $1 or $5 out of each paycheck that will go into the employee relief fund? If you contribute, company originally we did 20% match. We'd match 20% of whatever the employees gave. We now do 100% of whatever they give. So essentially, and so it's like now when we have, somebody have a hardship, we can just write them a check and help them out. So that's been really cool. And how it's grown over the years, now we've got $30-something thousand in that account that we, and so it's been really cool to see that. We had a gal that had cancer, so we had a guy that just had a major medical issue, and we basically covered his whole medical deductible. So because it's a hardship that they would carry forever, and then we've had employees that have all of a sudden garnishments coming through, and so we sit down with them and say, what's going on with this garnishment, and he said, man, I had this hardship, I can't pay the bill, and we're going to cover it for you. I mean, what that does to build loyalty with your employees is really cool.
Yeah, take care of your employees. They're going to take care of your business. And you reminded me of something I asked Dave Nicholson the other day. I'm just here sitting in awe of this is what you're saying, right? What a cool way to take care of your employees. I'd love to hear if over the years, I was just watching a movie over the weekend called Company Man, I think it's called. This guy lost his job during the 2008 crisis, and his brother-in-law hires him, and he's this big, big guy in corporate, and then he lost his job, went for 6 months unemployed, and then he has to put food on the table, so he starts working in construction with his brother-in-law, right? Had to throw his ego out the door, work in construction. And then, because his brother-in-law had helped him so much, he, at the end of the winter, was willing to, he already had gotten a job back into corporate, making a lot of money, but he was working for free for his brother-in-law just to give back, right? Over the years, can you think about one story of like how you've seen an employee or someone take care of your business that you were like, I didn't expect it of you, but wow, they're doing this, they're going above and beyond. Like, have you seen that translating to the front line?
Oh, we have a lot. It's amazing because one of the things we do is we do a recognition every month for raving fan customer, the raving fan service essentially. And how we do is we have our managers, or anybody can nominate anybody essentially inside the company. So we get tons of nominees, and then we award that employee for whoever wins it, and we have their management team vote on who should win that month essentially. So the process is, if you saw a Court do something amazing for outstanding service or whatever for a customer or for the company or whatever, then you could say, hey, I'm going to nominate Court for the Customer Service Award and do a big write-up, and we do those, and then we whether you win or not, we post all those write-ups.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And put them out to the rest of the staff so people can read what they're doing. And there's just it's amazing what people will do. You know what I mean? I mean, they'll personally deliver furniture in their own car. Because if the truck can't get it there, but the customer wants it or whatever. I mean, my property manager and Dave, in construction, that guy just goes above and beyond. I mean, and he'll go meet customers on Sundays, Saturdays. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? Even though he works 5 days a week, in the mornings. But I mean, just there's tons of that stuff that goes on, which I can't think specifically.
Yeah.
No,
those are great stories already.
Yeah, that's something that we really.
It feels to me like it comes down to two things, Joe. You have the right people coming into your company. Your guys' hiring process is dialed. You have your toothpaste lady that's phenomenal hiring. And then the culture is amazing. You guys retain the right people and repel the wrong people. Is it just, if somebody can master those two things, are they going to be able to have the kind of success where they can say, man, I can have multiple teams because we have the right people doing the right things and we're retaining them? Does that cover 80% of the problems?
For sure, I think. I think that's been, when we started really focusing on our culture and finding the right people and retaining those people, it made it a lot easier to grow, for sure, and be able to branch out into these other businesses and such. As I look at when we've had the wrong people in the wrong roles, my life has been hell, honestly. I think there's been times when, as I look back at life's lifeline, your high points and your low points. My low points is when I was dealing with employee issues, for sure. But right now I'm blessed to have the people that we have. I mean, maybe I have a lot of long-term people. My marketing director's been with me 30 years. Our graphic designers, like almost 20 years. My construction manager, he's been with me 15 years, but we worked together for even longer than that with other projects before. He had his own company and then came to work for me. But he was doing all of our projects, so it's even longer. Our relationship's more like 30. But so we've just got a really, my warehouse manager's been 20 plus years. I mean, so we've got a lot of people that have been there, and so there's this. It's hard to replace that. You know what I mean? That institutional knowledge, that institutional, and they help weed them out. They help weed out the bad fits. You know what I mean? If you don't have the leadership in those roles, it's easy for imposters to come into your company and you know, now you've got this big rose garden, now it's a bunch of weeds, you know. So.
I just have one more question, Carlos. I'm guessing you have at least one.
Yes, I do have my last question for you, Joe. On the personal side, over the years, what is the greatest piece of advice you have ever received?
You know, I think honestly, I think it really kind of goes back to what we talked about with that consultant asking that question to us. You know, I think when she basically posed the question, are you a family first business or a business first family? And I think in adopting that mindset has really been huge. You know, I think it's, you know, as I look at, you know, there's been hardships in that for sure, because we don't see eye to eye from a family standpoint. But I think when I look at, we have 140 employees, you know, and so there's 140 families relying on that business for an income, not just mine or my partners, my sisters. So I think that, you know, running that business with that philosophy in mind, and that you know, was probably one of the best.
And the tens of thousands of customers that you guys serve every year.
Yeah.
Joe, my question to you is, you're sitting across from 25-year-old Joe. Staring at you. He's just as jacked as you are now. Just got done playing college football. Physique looks exactly the same though. What do you tell him?
You know, that's an easy one for me, honestly, because I think that my daughter and my son are working in the business now. My son works for me on the construction side. My daughter is selling real estate, but also doing interior design. So she's our selection manager. She selects all of our product with our customers on that side. I have the pleasure of working with my kids. And one of the things I'm constantly telling, they're 29 and 27, so maybe a little older than 25. But I think it's celebrate the wins. You know, celebrate the wins more often. You know, I think we get caught up in problem solving and putting out fires all the time. And I think we jump from one to the next. And I think when you step back and see success, you know, whether that's an employee doing something amazing for somebody, is stop and celebrate that. Don't just skip over it. Don't just let it go unheard and unsaid. You know, I think make sure that you recognize that in them and celebrate them for that. And I think, and then when we have personal, you know, successes, when we hit that profit goal or we hit that sales goal or finish that project, you know, close that deal, celebrate, man, recognize it. You know, I think, and I think, you know, my personality is to drive and just keep driving. So I think to step back and okay, be proud of what we just accomplished. Now set the next goal and go get it again. You know? I think it's probably it.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
This is a bonus question, so we're only gonna release it to the paid subscribers if we had any. But I grew up with a few people around me that their parents were successful. Well, I knew people that their parents were successful. They ran businesses. Every single one of them was repelled by, did not want to work with their parents. Like a friend of mine did not want to run his family, you know, his dad's business, his dad's law practice. You have your two children working with you right now, and you know what a blessing that is. What is the secret for that? Because my experience has been like everyone I know just was repelled by that, but your kids seem to be doing well, and you're having that experience with them.
You know, a couple things, I guess. One is communication. You know, is huge, and I think, but it really goes back to what's the goal. You know, I think I love this saying that I talk about all the time. In the absence of clearly defined goals, one becomes involved in activity and is eventually consumed by it. So I think, you know, I've been a major goal setter my whole life. You know, I think what it started with football and what I, you know, wanted to accomplish, what I wanted to achieve. But it really ties over to my business now. And I think that, you know, that right now ties into what are we trying to accomplish? You know what I mean? And I think that clearly, you know, I think that's where, going back to that advice question that you had in regards to, you know, are we business first? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What's our goal in that? You know, our goal is to create a business that it's not, we're not a quarter horse. We're a thoroughbred. We're running the long run. This is a marathon. We're not a sprinter. You know, this business is 45 years old, so we want to be here for the long haul. We're not a company that we want to just flip it and sell. You know what I mean? Grow it and get out and take our money and go. We've really been looking at this business as it's a long-term plan. It's a long-term estate process, and I think that's how I'm communicating that to my kids right now. Is I want to, you know, I've worked 35 years in this business now, and you know, I hope it's something that I can pass down. You know, not to handicap them with that, because I think, you know, when you look at success rates on even a second generation business, most of them fail.
Yes.
90% fail. So I think we've had a great run. You know, 22 years being majority shareholders, but. You know, hopefully it's, whether it's this business or assets that pass to them that we're trying to pass on a legacy and an estate, essentially. And something for the community in reality. I think Gardner Village is, you know, with the history that we have going back to 1853, that Archibald Gardner built that flour mill in 1853. So there's a long legacy, long history that ties to that whole thing, and that's what we kind of really want to pass down. So.
I love that.
That's good.
Joe, this has been amazing. Thanks, brother.
Dude, it's great to hang out with you guys.
Such an honor to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Joe.
My pleasure.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.